Well, today I will be talking about something very different. British battle axes. And, um, hear me clearly when I say this. This is a very different meaning. British battle axes I'm talking about are the ones that are women in British sitcoms. Funny as it may seem, that's what they're called in the British sitcoms as battle axes. Women who just push men around. These are my favorites. This is Linda Barron, best known as Gladys Emanuel in Open All Hours. She was Arkwright's fiance in the show, living across the street from Arkwright in his shop. Arkwright always went across the street begging Gladys Emanuel to marry him. And the show is hilarious, just the way she would always go across the street, bother him. Just Arkwright was a very, very cheap person in the show. Never stepped outside, of spending money. It was a really, really funny episode where he took his washing machine at one point wasn't even electric. It was just hand done. And he's like, my washer isn't electric. And she storms over there, bursts through the door, goes in his back room, starts saying, what do you have in here? Like, you need to get up to date. Always pushing him around for the better, in a way. And it's just constant hilarity. Linda Barron died in March of 2022, this year, at the age of 82. But she will always be remembered as Gladys Emanuel in Open All Hours. And Still Open All Hours, the sequel to the old show they did from 2013 to 2016. So she was a very, very funny lady, powerhouse, just full bossiness in the best way. Always put Arkwright in his right place, right where he needed to be in the show. And of course she reprised her role in Open All Hours, Still Open All Hours. Of course, the original Arkwright died in the early 2000s, but David Jason, who played beside Arkwright, was in the show. And yes. But the show was very popular at a time. It just drew in so many people at the time. Very popular probably not back in its day, but again, it was done by, I believe, Roy Clark. So she was a very funny lady and very funny series. Here's another one everyone should know. Molly Sugden. Molly Sugden was Mrs. Slocum in Are You Being Served? Sharing the men's department in Grace Brothers department store. I'm telling you, this is just hilarious. The way she just handled the issues of being in the men's department, having to share, having to put up with the men. And if there were any time she had to speak on something, she would speak. She would speak loud. She was not going to put up with any nonsense in the men's department. And she would always let them know how she felt. And of course, with the running joke in the show, always referring to her cat. Now, listen closely as I say, referring to her cat as her pussy. It's not the most cleanest joke, but it was the running joke with her throughout the entire series. And it just made people laugh so hard. Mind you, most people have the dirty minded for that. It was meant to be a bit raunchy, but, just remember she was referring to her cat. You can call cats that. Well, again, she was wonderful in the TV show. Molly Sugden died in 2009 at the age of 86, and she died just months after her other co-star, Wendy Richard, who passed away of cancer, so they died within months of each other. Always best known, we will always know Molly Sugden as Mrs. Slocum in Are You Being Served? And it is probably one of the greatest sitcoms that was ever made. So, but yes, she was one of the most wonderful and recognized British ladies of comedy, and she was in numerous things over the years, such as That's My Boy. She made appearances in The Liverbirds, and she was on television a lot, made all kinds of guest appearances, in Love Thy Neighbor, The Doctors in Charge. She was in a lot of TV appearances, and even did the Are You Being Served movie as well. So her credits to her go way above and beyond to this comedic lady. Jean Beau, who was in the Bread series, British series called Bread. So her character relied on her family, all living together at once. 4 boys, a daughter, granddad, who lived beside them, and her ex-husband, who did not live with them, but at the show's time, in the show, her ex-husband had a relationship with another woman, and they are all a strong Catholic family. And I don't believe they ever really had work. They just played the DSS around, or if you don't know what the DSS was, basically that's, in America, that'd be our Social Security office, just, begging the Social Security office for money. They would go to the DSS and try to play them and run off the DSS office, which eventually in the show catches up to them in a big way. But she was very powerful in this series. She did not put up with anything. Clearly one of her best traits in the show was dealing with Lila Lil, who was the other woman in the show, the ex-husband's other girlfriend, and her points where she would just be like, "Don't go near Lila Lil, don't you say her name in this house." The big great saying of, "She is a tart." And she would yell it in the house if anyone mentioned it. She was a very bitter woman about it. She never wanted to. She wanted to, but I don't think she ever forgave her husband in the show. There is a point in the show where her and Lila Lil get into a big fight, but in an odd way, in the end of the fight, they're in the house together, and they're sitting down to realize that, why are we doing this? Because my husband doesn't really want me, but my husband doesn't really want you either. He just wants to hop back and forth between you two. The show itself dealt with that in a comedic way, but in a very serious way too. And Jean Bao, who played the mother, did a very good job in this show, and I think the sense of seriousness and comedy within the show really works well. And her performance as the mother in this show, Bread, was very well done. So she's living well. She's living well at 90 years old. I believe still making some appearances in TV shows. So she was great. If you know her, she was Mrs. Bridges in the original Upstairs Downstairs in the 1970 series. Before Downton Abbey came along, the original was Upstairs Downstairs. This show took off. This was a drama. In America, people thought it was like a documentary, but it was like a drama in England. And it ran for 5 series, I believe, and Angela Badley was the cook downstairs. Her gruff voice made her a powerhouse in this series. She as a battle axe, did not put up with any nonsense in the kitchen. She helped run the downstairs. Her bulky, gruff voice, as Mrs. Bridges, really came alive in that character. And I love her. I love her in this show because she took the bull by the horns, and she doesn't play around in the kitchen. Angela Badley sadly died shortly after the series was finished. I do believe they were going to make a spin-off of the show with her and Ruby, who was the kitchen help, And that's another thing with her. She was so funny, always yelling at Ruby. Ruby, what have you done now? Ruby, I told you to do this, and you mix it up with this. This show was a drama. This show dealt with a lot of serious issues. Affairs, suicide, all kinds of issues, very serious issues for its time. I believe the show was set in the early 1900s, so it's a period era show. Fun fact, Angela Badley is the sister of Hermione Badley, and if you know who Hermione Badley is, or was, she was the cook in Mary Poppins, and she was the housekeeper in Maude. So she was a British-American actress. So they were sisters, which is really, really cool. Great actresses. And personally, me, the best battle axe woman ever to be on screen in British television was Nora Batty in Last the Summer Wine. She was the battle axe first of all, probably one of the most first that I know of, that I just personally fell in love with. When first time I saw her in Last the Summer Wine, this woman, played by the wonderful Kathy Staff, just did not play. Her neighbor Campo in Last the Summer Wine, any foolishness was going around with Campo, she would take her brush and just let him have it verbally or with the brush. Of course, Combo would never let up on Nora Batty, always having that dream wish that, guess what? We're going to get married one day, or guess what? Just constantly chasing her around. And Nora Batty was a no play kind of woman at all. She didn't like something, she would tell you right out, right there. Foolishness was not in her game in Last of the Summer Wine. I loved that about her. The moment I saw her on screen and started looking at that character, I'm like, hilarious. Absolutely hilarious woman. Absolutely loved her in this show. She did the entire series from 1972 up until her death in 2008. The series itself ran until 2010, but her passing in 2008 at the age of 80 years old shortened her career run with Last of the Summer Wine. But as I said, with her, she will be the best British woman character. I love it. I love I just love the sense of, I want to say meanness. Because I know there were moments in this series where she was rather soft and she knew, she wanted to be a gentler person, but always never playing around. And yeah, she played well with this series. And yes, as I said, the best British battle axe woman on television ever in British series was Cathy Staff as Nora Batty. And her film roles included a lot more. She was in Crossroads. She had guest appearances in other British TV shows, popping up as guest appearances like Open All Hours. She was in all kinds of other things. Always recognizable once you saw her. Her voice, of course, was instantly recognized. And her characteristics of the show were immediately seen in guest appearances. And, of course, Last Summer Wine, which personally I think is the greatest British show that was ever made by Roy Clark. One of the longest running TV series too, from 1972 up until 2010 when the show was canceled. I think just shy of 40 years that show went on. But the one main woman and the battle axes in any TV show, whether things I've seen over the years with British comedy, she is top notch. She's number one in my book. I personally think she paved the way for other battle axes and British women in comedy, And yeah, that's what I love about it. No play around with these character actresses in British television. Always. Never.